Good evening. This is Jason Horak. It is Wednesday, September 19th, 2012. We are looking at the 1987 Dodge Daytona electric vehicle that you may notice is still here in Cortland, New York. It was scheduled to ship last Friday, the 14th, but I talked to the shipping company, and it turns out that what they really meant was that it would ship at some point between the 14th and the 24th, when it has to actually be in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So I have heard from them, and they're going to be picking up the car at some point on Thursday. That would be the 20th, tomorrow. So I had a couple extra days to kind of look into some additional things, and when I was talking to my dad recently, he asked me, alright, well, now that the EV's done, what's next? And I said, well, there's a couple things that I'd like to change on the electric car, and just more enhancements and modifications and so forth. And one of those things is the power brakes. The car originally had power brakes, but when the vacuum assist went away, along with the original internal combustion engine, it no longer functioned. And this particular car also has a really, or kind of an odd thing, that the dash controls, like when you're changing from the exhaust to, the defrost to the heater, to the vents and so forth, it has kind of a push button control, and those push buttons are actually run by the vacuum assist. So it's kind of an odd setup, something they did in the 80s, I guess, and who knows, maybe modern cars do that too. But so anyway, since there was no vacuum in this car, that didn't work, and right from the get-go I had planned on buying this vacuum, it's a vacuum pump and reservoir configuration, and I got this particular unit from EV Source online when I originally bought it back in, I'm thinking late 2009, early 2010 for the first electric car, and it seemed very complicated at the time. There was a lot of wires and relays and crazy stuff, and I didn't really understand. Also, it turned out that the car didn't really need power brakes. Being a relatively small car, it's 3,400 pounds, give or take, and the regular four-wheel disc brakes with no power assist. People notice that there's more pedal pressure than your average car, but otherwise it stops just fine, so it wasn't a big deal. Anyway, I didn't know how loud this was going to be, and I still don't at this point, but that was one of the things I was kind of worried about, was the noise factor for the power brake pump, or the vacuum pump rather. These little units are supposed to be quiet. This particular one has a muffler on the side that is filled with transmission fluid, and that's supposed to greatly reduce the sound, because the way a vacuum pump works is it's going to suck air in here, creating the vacuum, and then blow it out here, I think in pulses. Again, I haven't turned this thing on, so I don't really know what it sounds like, but that's sort of my understanding of how things work. So anyway, it came with this nice bracket around here that holds it very securely, and I fashioned this little block of blue foam insulation with the Gorilla Tape on it to serve as a buffer, so that hopefully the vibration from this unit when it's running won't be transmitted into the car, where it's going to be bolted onto using this bolt. So anyway, that's my theory. And so this is the whole kit that they sent me. I can't remember exactly how much it cost. I'm thinking, just under $500 maybe. But this is the vacuum canister, like a reservoir is what they call it. And so all it is a big empty metal canister that can hold vacuum, hold the pressure when it's been evacuated by the vacuum pump, and that gives you a few extra seconds worth of vacuum without the pump turning on every time. And that, at least, again, that's the theory. So this little unit here, this is the wiring for it, and so this is a sensor that tells how much vacuum pressure has happened, and it just trips, like, so that when the vacuum falls below a certain point, it completes this circuit and then allows things to turn on. So the way that works is that this is the electronics. Now the electronics are pretty straightforward, although again at first it seemed very complicated. There are two relays, and I'm not really sure why there's two, but that's how they're set up. So this smaller relay is hooked into the positive lead, and the negative, which is this wire, little thin wire here, that goes to this sensor. And so you just hook this one to ground, somewhere on the car, like the battery box here, for example, and then you hook this to some source of power that's switched, so that when you turn on your car, or in my case I have an actual switch on the dashboard that I can flip that sends power to this. So when this has power and this has a ground, because there's not enough vacuum, it will trip this relay and turn this on. Now that relay gives power to this relay. So this larger relay, just again, when this one turns on, this one gets powered, and it's a similar kind of thing. When this has power on, it's actually this lead right here, this red one, and when it is touching ground here, so again it's got another ground lead here, that trips this relay to turn on, which then allows power to flow from the main battery positive, which is right here, goes into the box and hooks to this relay right there. It's kind of this one right here, and then when this one turns on, it sends power out this big honkin' cable here, which has a giant fuse in it, which is upside down at the moment, but that says 40 amps. It's this big 40 amp fuse in the line, and this goes to right along here to the pump. So that's what actually turns the pump on, and then once again the pump has a ground that completes the circuit for the pump. So lots of wires for a pretty simple function of turn the pump on and off, but it is just positive and negative, and some of the complexity is just because of this little vacuum switch, so that it'll automatically know that the vacuum pressure has dropped. It'll turn the pump on, and then when the vacuum pressure gets to the right desired point, it will turn off again, and that way the pump won't be running all the time. Again, that's the theory. So the only other component that came with the kit, other than the tubes, was this thing, which is a one-way valve. So it just allows the air to be sucked through. I'm not sure which way it goes at the moment, but it gets sucked through, and then it can't go back, and so that just again kind of holds the vacuum pressure within the line, and it doesn't bleed out back through the pump. So just all that to keep things from to keep the vacuum in the lines. So the canister just gets hooked directly to the vacuum pump, so the tubing will hook to one of these leads. I'll have to check the documentation to see which one it goes into, but it's either here or here. And then the other one goes out and all the way around to the master cylinder vacuum booster thing, which just goes right here. So basically this will just go on that. And then this little small leads, again, it's kind of hard to see with all this stuff in here, but these little small tubes go out and through the firewall to all those buttons on the dashboard, so that you can change your valve positions and so forth without having additional electric motors in there or something. So anyway, that is the quick, or perhaps not so quick, overview of the power brake system. I have it all kind of figured out on where it's going to go, and yeah, so actually let me just show you that real quick. So in this big empty cavity on the side, we've got there's a big hole here and this was where the original vapor canister was for, I'm not really sure its purpose in a gas car. It was hooked to vacuum, and it was hooked to the like the gas tank, and so I guess like excess vapor would get vacuumed away or something. I'm not really sure, but anyway, that's what that hole is for. And so there's actually a pretty big cavity underneath this panel that's sort of well, not secure, but it's somewhat protected from the elements and things. And so what I'm going to do is right in this space here is where I'm going to put the canister, the reservoir. So this will go kind of in here somewhere, right about there, and then hook up to the outgoing tube here that goes in behind the battery box and over there to the master brake cylinder deal. So, alright, and then try to do this without making everyone hurl. Nice and slow. Gonna take a look underneath. Extreme close-up of the ground. It's pretty exciting. So this is, the underside of the car, and you can see the net gain motor and the throttle, or the RPM sensor there on the end, and the big metal plate that holds it all together, all that fun stuff, the wiring. Up there's the soliton. So anyway, what we're looking at today is this little cavity right up under here, which is open to the bottom. It's open to the ground here, but it's protected from the wheel well with this big plastic piece, and then it's protected on the other sides just by the frame of the car. So what I'm going to do is put the pump up in there, which hopefully will kind of keep it as far from the driver and the passengers as I can, just in case it's really loud. So I've drilled a hole, which you probably can't see at this point, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and mount the power steering pump, the vacuum pump, and then we'll have the reservoir up above, and hopefully that should be the whole system. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and make that happen, so I will get back to you all in hopefully a few minutes. Thanks. Alrighty then, it is now about 5:30 in the morning, and we have the vacuum pump has been installed. As you can see, it's very secure up in there and isn't going anywhere anytime soon. As far as the plumbing goes, way up in the top, it's kind of hard to make out, but there is a vacuum hose that hooks to the top brass pipe there, and then wiring wise, pretty simple. The negative is right there, that this hooks up to that, and then the positive is this black tubing that goes up along and over there. It's a wiring loom. It's actually the technical term for it. And that's all zip tied nicely. And of course, then you can see that the muffler has plenty of clearance, lots of room for the airflow to come out of the pump, and yeah, and it's reasonably safe down in there. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the top of of this setup. And there we be. So this is the reservoir. I ended up using kind of a little different setup than I was originally planning, just because it didn't fit real well vertically. It kind of hit on this a little bit and just wasn't a clean fit. So I decided to lay it down, and the plumbing is pretty straightforward. So it comes up from that brass pipe that we saw on the bottom, up this tube, and in here on the bottom, which is the light isn't real good, but it's a black plastic fitting there. And then the output is a bronze fitting that goes to here and around and behind the battery box and down underneath there. So it's kind of hard to see, the lighting isn't real good, but there's the little valve, and that's all wired in to that box that I showed you earlier, which has now been placed underneath here on top of the other two wiring boxes. So it all fits in there rather neatly. Again, you don't really notice it while looking at the engine compartment at this point. It's all sort of invisible, which was kind of the whole plan. So other than this big reservoir over here, which I may or may not keep, it seems to have a leak of some kind. So it sort of hisses as it releases its vacuum pressure. So that's no good. But it might just need some pipe. I think it's like a tape or something that they put on the threads. So anyway, that's all installed, and what we're going to do is just do a quick little demo of what it sounds like. So I'll go ahead and turn on the car, and again it is dark because it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I reset my clock when I was working on stuff, but okay, so here we are, and I've wired it up to this switch right here. It's very loud, but doesn't last too long, and presumably I now have power brakes. So it's kind of cool. It did shut off on its own, so that means that the pressure sensor was wired up correctly and apparently works. And everything seems to be all set except for this little reservoir thing here that, and I'm not sure if the camera will pick up a little hissing, but there's a screw on the front of this that is sort of recessed, and I tried tightening it, I tried loosening it, it just didn't seem to make any difference. It seems to just still leak. So like I said, I'll try some of the plumber's tape around the threads of that screw, and hopefully that'll resolve this leaking issue. So, but yeah, so it is on, and oh, there it goes. Yeah, so as the vacuum leaks out of that canister, it eventually has to replenish itself, but it seems to be all automated and is doing the trick. So I guess the next step is to take the car out for a spin and see what happens. So anyway, as previously noted, it is Thursday now, the 20th, and this is when the shipping company is coming to pick up the car. So I don't really have a lot of time to test things or whatnot, but at least it's ready to go, and we'll load it on the truck and send it to Missouri. So I will probably take some video actually when they load it on the truck. Just the whole process of shipping a car is something that a lot of people may not realize how much of a pain in the neck it is. And there goes that pump again. So anyway, I gotta fix that leak in the vacuum system, because that'll be really annoying if that just keeps happening. But anyway, that's it for today. I'll get back to y'all later, and have a good one.